and I think I started within a few days, or at least maybe a week.
How long were you working for him as a...
Actually, it was about just a few weeks. After a few weeks, he made me the household officer, which meant I was responsible for the whole of the domestic arrangements for him and his family.
Were you on the Sea Org at that time already?
No. There was no Sea Org at that time. This is 1964.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly.
And it was I remember it was the Wimbledon week. It was the Wimbledon fortnight. I think it was in the middle of Wimbledon that I went down to the manor. Started there. And very soon, I saw him every day. He talked to me every day. And he started teasing me. And then he said to me, well, we only tease our friends. And after a while, of course I called him Sir. He said, my friends all call me Ron. So it was like that. We became good friends. And I was in that role for 18 months. At the end of 1965, I said to him that I was kind of interested in moving over into the Saint Hill organization, because to tell the truth, I wasn't all that interested in being a servant, a domestic servant. But I thought I'd done enough of that, and so he made me LRH Communicator at Saint Hill in early 1966, and I was on that post for a while. Then he made me LRH Com worldwide. I came off that fairly soon. I had different posts, but then I kept coming back to the LRH Com post, and in 1968, after he'd set up the Sea Organization, and after he'd been sending some missions to Saint Hill, he made me HCO exec worldwide, which was a very difficult position because the Sea Org was bypassing worldwide a lot. But in October or November, he ordered that I be sent from Saint Hill to the ship. I had not signed a Sea Org contract, and I wasn't looking to sign a Sea Org contract. And when I supposed that I was being called to the ship so that I could have a COMEV, some kind of justice action, and that I would go through some penalty and then be sent back. However, when I got to the ship, people seemed to think that I had arrived to be on the ship and be part of the Sea Org. I didn't say anything because I thought, well, I'm in trouble. I don't need to cause any more trouble. But I was put on a little project for him immediately. And I met him one day on the ship, and he made me very welcome. And I met Mary Sue, and she made me very welcome. And the project was finished, and I was put on the deck project force. I thought, well, there was no word about a COMEV, and I wasn't asking for one, so we just went from day to day. And then I think I was suddenly put on a different project to do with policy, and then I was made LRH Com Apollo. So I decided I'd stay and see what happened. So I stayed to see what happened, and within a short while he made me his personal communicator. And on that position, I was there really only to serve him and to do whatever I could to make his job as doable as possible for him. That was by 1969.
Okay. How did it happen that you, after being so close to Ron Hubbard and working for him directly, how come you end up out of the church? Why and when did you leave?
Okay, well, I'll give you a little background.
Okay.
He and I seemed to work very well together for about 3 years. Then in September of 72, he had to leave. He was off the ship. He was living he had bought a house in Tangier. He and Mary Sue were in that house, and the ship was in Lisbon, I think, in dry dock for some kind of repair or service. And he got word that the French government had obtained orders allowing them to extradite him from Morocco to Paris, where there was a trial against Scientology. So he had to move, and he went over to New York and stayed there for a year. When he came back, he had changed quite a bit, and our relationship had changed. He no longer seemed to have as much confidence in me as he had before. And I have to say that he started moving in a direction that I just couldn't follow him in as closely as I had before. I couldn't support him as much as I had before. He'd become much more autocratic, and that was mainly it. He had changed. There was less ARC around him. And then in 1974, we went over the Atlantic and moved everybody most people from the ship ashore into Florida. When we got into Florida, he was very stressed by the situation of the Flag setting up in Clearwater and what was going on between the Flag and the local city government and so on, and the press. That was very difficult for him, and I really wasn't of much help to him there. It was mostly Guardian's office work that was going on, which certainly was not my specialty by any means. And
that's some animal.
Yes, little frog, I think.
Little frog. Also wants to participate in the interview.
Yes.
Okay. So
I was asking some questions.
Yeah.
So we were living there. Then word got out that he was present in the area, and the press were after him. He had to move again. So in, I think, February of 1975, he left Florida, and that's the last time I saw him. He left me behind and went off with a couple of people, and then eventually he made his way over to California. I stayed at Flag, and I was on the same post. I was still his communicator until 1978. And in 1978, there was some difficulty, there was some problem that I was involved in, and I was put on the meter, and it was found that I was a List 1 RSer. And that means that I had a rock slam on the meter on the subject of Scientology or Dianetics or Ron or Mary Sue, which means that I had very evil purposes. And of course, how I could have had all these very evil purposes for all these years and been so close to L. Ron Hubbard and Mary Sue and Dianetics and Scientology was never explained. And but anyway, I think there were people who were very glad to have the excuse to take me off the post. So I was taken off the post and put in the RPF. I actually was not unhappy with that at all, because it gave me the chance to get back into tech, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. So I was an auditor in the RPF, and eventually I was pulled out of the RPF to become an interviewer in the NOTS HGC in Flag. NOTS had come, I was in the RPF in 79 and NOTS started in 79. They needed an interviewer and I was pulled out of the RPF to be that. While I was doing that, I trained up to be a NOTS auditor myself. And in 1980, I started doing that auditing. In 1981, between 81 and 82, I was the highest producing NOTS auditor at Flag. At the same time, I was becoming very unhappy with the way the group, which I had joined in the 1950s, had changed. It was no longer purposeful, and it was no longer friendly. It was just so different than the group that had inspired me to get into and continue with Scientology. It was as far as I was concerned, it was no longer Scientology. It was something else. So I was then immediately thinking of leaving. I had a little bit of a problem with that because as LRH's communicator, of course my name was quite well known amongst people who had been in the Sea organization for at least a few years. There were a lot of people who were new, didn't know me from Adam. But I thought to myself, well, if I just up and leave, then people for whom I had been a stable terminal might find themselves destabilized and thinking perhaps about leaving just because I had left and not because they made up their own minds about what they should do. And I didn't want to influence them that way. So I figured out a way to leave quietly, which was to take a leave of absence and then deal with the situation after a while. And so, because I wanted a leave of absence, I had to be sec checked. And it took them a year to get through all the sec checks they wanted to give me. By the time I was ready to go, the new management level of RTC was formed. This is late 1982. And the new management was convinced that I had been part of some conspiracy by other existing execs to take control of the church. I wasn't. I knew everybody that was being committed, but I wasn't part of any conspiracy, if there was a conspiracy. So I was sec-checked on that, but eventually they let me go. They just told me to pack my bags and leave the base. So I did. I was overdue to see my parents, my father and my stepmother. I hadn't seen them for a very long time. So I went to stay with them for a little while. Then I came back to the States. I got work with another person who had left the organization here in the States, and I've been here since.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a story.